Welcome to the Business of Story, where we connect you with the leading minds in the art of business storytelling. Learn from best-selling authors, Hollywood screenwriters, makers, content marketers, and brand raconteurs on how to craft and tell compelling stories that sell. The Business of Story is brought to you by Emma, which provides innovative email marketing tools and services that drive brilliant results. And by Convince and Convert, digital marketing advisors and counselors to leading brands and organizations worldwide. Convince and Convert helps you gain and keep your customers online. Here's your host, Park Howell.
The most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a good one. Hi everyone, Park Howell here at Business of Story. So happy you're with me today. And if you are a longtime listener, you've probably heard me share that line several times. The most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a good one. I also like to back that up with, no one's going to buy your story until you own it first. Well, those two thoughts come together in today's show with our guest, who is a business lifestyle expert. And she has gone from being in a Fortune 500 company, a change agent within that company, also in appreciating the superpower she had within her to help coach people, to optimize them to their greatest successes. She left a very well-paying job in the safety net of a Fortune 500 company, went out on her own, blew up fabulously. Father comes to her and says, maybe it's time you get a job again, because I don't think this whole solopreneur thing's going to work out for you, which was the fire she needed that lit under her. Went out, she changed her story. She realized she was living into the incorrect or the story that didn't work for her. Once she changed her story, her whole world opened up. And she's going to share that story with us today because she has gone on to coach many, many companies, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs to great success by helping them understand how to change their story. Her name is Melanie Benson. We're so fortunate to have her with us today. We cover a lot on this topic. Let me tell you some of my 3 favorite things within the show. You're probably going to find 4 or 5 others that really resonate with you. My 3 are, number 1, how can you move from an I can't story to one that makes you feel comfortable, confident, even courageous, taking on that thing that you felt like you couldn't do before? The second one that really struck me was how to change mindsets that impact your habits to create all new strategies that totally optimize you for success. Again, change your story, change your life. It all comes together. And then number 3, Melanie shares with us the success barriers to keep you from having what you want in life. There's 3 primary stories that we tell ourselves that just absolutely get in our way. All in all, she has a brand new ebook out, totally free. I'm going to let her tell you about that later in the show, but you can download it and start putting these story-changing, habit-breaking, optimizing, impactful story elements in your life on today's show with Business of Story. So let's jump right into it with Melanie Benson. Hey, Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Park. I'm really excited to get into the story of business today.
This is great. It's fun having you here because so often we bring in what we call quote-unquote story artists, and they are folks that are either making a living at the storytelling business, be they screenwriters, directors, producers, that sort of thing, or content marketers, business leaders who are really using story to help our listeners advance their causes, their missions, their businesses. You are very much of a strategist that come in. You have this Fortune 500 background, but you reinvented yourself, created a new story for you to live into, and now it sounds like you're doing the same thing for your clients and kind of turning strategy. I don't know, the way I say it is strategy in my mind is always sort of left brain, very pragmatic approach, which we all need. I like to bring that over to the story side. So how do we live into those strategies through the stories we tell ourselves? And that's what we're going to explore today. So give us a little bit about your backstory. How do you find yourself here with me today?
Oh boy. Well, that's a long story. We could actually do a whole podcast just on that. But, I find myself here today a very passionate entrepreneur, somebody who I love how the mind works. And I realized somewhere along the line, I became addicted to high performance strategies, right? If I'm going to spend my time doing something, I want to have it be the best experience. And I want to know that my time is being invested into an outcome that has meaning and value. So that serves me really well in the entrepreneurial world because, of course, I serve a lot of creatives and a lot of people who have these great big ideas and visions, and they've got really passionate about doing something, but they don't really know how to organize themselves to get things done. And somewhere along the way, Park, I realized that, the stories that we tell ourselves about life, about business, about relationships, about money, whatever that thing is, they have a huge influence over our ability to have the very thing we want. So somewhere along the line, I got really excited and really good at helping people develop new internal mindset stories that can actually shift the results they're getting through their business. And so today, that's a big part of what I do with the, either the newer business owner, the newer entrepreneur who's trying to figure it all out, all the way up to people who have been in business for a while and they realize they're hitting this wall and maybe they're getting burned out and they somehow want to reinvent their results and they haven't figured out how to do it. And I realize it's all starting in our mind with what we tell ourselves all day long.
So how did you get to that point? You had a Fortune 500 background, working in a large organization, presumably. Give us a little bit about that backstory. Why did you leave that particular life and find yourself doing what you're doing today?
Well, so I was following a path that my father impressed upon me that was really important. Get a job. I went to my undergraduate. I got my graduate degree in business organization, and my dad wanted me to have a secure financial life. So I was in corporate America for almost 15 years total, and I was with a Fortune 500 company for 10 years. And I realized somewhere along that path, I just didn't feel like I fit. And I always felt like I had these ideas and these strengths that nobody in that organization knew what to do with. So they put me in this job as a coordinator of, we did total customer satisfaction circles based on the Japanese technique of putting customers and different members of an organization together. And they would put me into solving problems that we had. And I would get really excited about it. But then they're like, but this isn't a real job. So we've got to figure out, how you're going to be employed by us. And I never felt like I fit. And so it was really frustrating.
What were those talents, those ideas and talents that they were having a hard time connecting you with?
I was a creative and I was a problem solver and I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to make things work better. But the different vehicles for doing that in that company were not enjoyable to me because they got wrapped around technology. So at one point, I was working in our project management side of the company and trying to help customers most of our customers were public safety organizations. And so I would be in charge of getting their technology put in place. But then I didn't really understand the technology. So my brain would spin all the time and I wasn't in my passion. But what I did feel passionate about was solving problems and creating extraordinary results in record time. That's what lit me up. I loved putting teams together and getting people to achieve things that nobody thought they could achieve. And I realized at some point, because our company was starting to be consulted by Stephen Covey, I started to see the way our managers leading people change. I started to feel like a human being with real value instead of somebody that was just going to get a job done in our company. And I started to have my managers see me in a new way and pay attention to what felt important to me. And I realized there was something about that experience that made me want to just get fired up and inspired. And I realized they were learning to coach. Stephen Covey was teaching our managers to lead by coaching. And I was on fire and I was excited. And I said, I want to learn how to do that too. And all of a sudden I realized there was no place for me to be a coach inside that corporation. But the idea of coaching people to achieve things they never thought they could achieve simply by activating the most powerful version of them and lighting them up and making them resourceful and causing them to be able to achieve goals, that was what I wanted to do with my life. And so that's about 10 years into my business. Into working for them. I switched gears and I came up with a game plan and got some training on being a coach and struck my flag out there in the world and put up that website that nobody ever sees until you learn how to drive traffic. But I, decided I was going to be my own boss. And it was so liberating and so freeing and terrifying all at the same time, because I had a story that I wasn't good at selling. And that if you create something really magical, you don't have to market, people will find you. I had this crazy idea in my head, which of course very quickly I saw the reality and the mistake of my my limited thinking there. But
the universe is kind, but it's not that kind. It's not
exactly. Yeah, the you build it and they will come didn't really work outside of the movie.
Melanie, take us through that moment when you had this nice job, Fortune 500, you're living dad's story, because, all of us dads want our kids to be successful and productive and off of our payroll. When you decided, I'm not doing this anymore, and I am going to strike out on my own as a coach. Take us through that moment. What were you feeling? What totally changed? As they say in the story world, what was the inciting incident that finally gave you the guts to make the move?
I think I could finally see a way to make money with a skill set that I didn't know. I didn't know how to articulate it until I understood what a coach did. And there was a moment where I didn't really know what it meant to do what I did, but I was walking through this bookstore. One of my great passions is books, and I love books. I love being with books, which is making me very sad. A lot of our bookstores are going away. But I was walking through this bookstore, and you know how they have those rounders of books that they pile on top of each other to showcase a book. And I'm walking past it, and I don't know if I bumped the table or something really magical happened, but a book fell off, landed at my feet, and it was Cheryl Richardson's Take Time for Your Life. And in that moment, I picked up the book, and I'm kind of looking through the table of contents, and I'm thinking, this title describes me. I do not have time for a life. That year, I had been on the road somewhere close to 275 to 300 days. I didn't feel like I had a life, and I was really starting to get burned out. And I knew if I was going to feel vivacious again and have energy and be excited, I had to do something different. And I bought that book. I took it home and I devoured it in like 3 or 4 days. And I realized that what Cheryl Richardson was talking about on those pages when she explained how she coached her clients and the way in which she helped them create a life that they loved, that I not only needed that, but I wanted to do that for other people. And that's really what became the inspiration. And it's like I saw a path and made the decision right then and there that I was going to be a coach and I was going to start coaching people. And so it took me about a year. I created a game plan. I started getting clients. I worked a process. I hired a coach to help me kind of figure out what my model of that was going to look like. And I set a goal. And this was the thing that I've coached a lot of people since then, Park, about leaving their own corporate world and the safety net there to strike out on their own. And I put a line in the sand and I said, I will leave when I either have 8 paying clients or this date, whatever comes first. And I got the 8 clients right about the time that I had the line in the sand, which was a year to the day. And I gave my notice. And interestingly enough, I gave my notice 2 weeks before 9/11 occurred. And of course, going back in time, if I could have changed that a little bit, I would have done it earlier or maybe after the world had settled again, because it really put my game plan in jeopardy, and it changed everything so dramatically that I was kind of like grasping at straws for a while. But I wouldn't change the fact that I left and struck out on my own and had to figure out how to get profitable, without exactly the right path that I thought I was going to take.
It's interesting. We were talking about the universe and how the universe, counting on it, is not a great SEO strategy, but it does have a way to punch us in the nose to get our attention to say it's time to make a change. In this case, it stepped on your toes by dropping a book on it and saying, hey, Melanie, it's time to wake up and move on. So I love that. The other thing about this, in your story, you talk about the specifics of a date or a deadline. And all great stories have these kinds of specifics. You had a date at which time you were going to leave, but it gave you the deadline, but you also said, I need these 8 clients to make it worth it. And so our brains snap to attention when we have those kinds of deadlines in the stories. I mean, every great movie you see that you really enjoy in Hollywood has an absolute time frame associated with it, and something has to happen by such and such a time. So we put those in our own lives to leverage and optimize our growth. But it's also something that happens absolutely naturally in the stories that we love.
I also feel like it helps I'm all about optimizing and making things perform better. And I realize if you don't have that clarity of the moment you get to make that choice, if you don't know what it looks like, that in-game keeps changing. It'll never actually happen. So I'm a big fan of saying, at this time, this is what has to be there. So for me, it was 8 clients or this date. And that drove my behavior and my decision-making and every choice. So I was laser focused on that. But if you don't have that defined outcome, it's very vague, and your mind will keep putting that goal out there in the future someday, and you never actually cross the threshold.
Yeah, absolutely too vague. So then what happened? You launched in your business, 9/11 goes down, freaks everybody out, rightly so. So you're starting a business in the turmoil, the aftermath of that. Did you have some initial successes? And even more importantly, what did the failures look like?
Well, there was probably a lot more failure than there were successes at that time. As a matter of fact, I would have to say that most entrepreneurs, if they're telling the absolute truth, would say they probably have somewhere between a 7 to 8 to 1 ratio of failure to success, because that's the name of the business, is you try things and they don't always work. And what I was trying at that point was I was trying to learn how to make money by selling my time, my knowledge, my process. And it was really hard. And keep in mind, I had this story that I wasn't good at selling. Like, selling was what used car salespeople did, and they made people do things that they didn't want and made them feel awful. And I had this horrible thing in my head about it. And so I really resisted having sales conversations. It was really uncomfortable for me. And Park, I had no idea how to message what I did. I knew what I was. I knew what I could help people achieve, but I didn't have a huge track record yet. I didn't have any credibility out there in the world, and I was under 30. So not only do I have this added challenge of trying to translate a safe job where everything's handled for you to making money on my own, but I would go to a networking meeting, and these really well-meaning older women would say things like this to me. Well, you're like a baby. How can you teach me anything about business? I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, way to shoot my confidence down. And that's really what I think happens to a lot of new people, is when you don't have credibility, you don't have proven results in your model, you don't have a track record of achieving results, and you're trying to figure out how to position what you can do for someone else. It really starts with having confidence in your outcomes. And I had to go through a process of learning how to be confident when I had none, how to be courageous enough to go out and stand on a stage and speak to a big room of people when I'd never done anything like that before. So there was a lot of newness. And basically what I spent my first 2 years doing was suffering and struggling, trying to figure out how to make ends meet on about $1,000 a month. And in case you didn't know this, I live in Los Angeles, which is it's really impossible. You cannot live on $1,000 a month in Los Angeles. So I was tanking very quickly. And there became what I consider a game-changing moment for me. I realized at some point I had a story that I had lived in since I was a child called struggle financially. My mom was a single mom, and we did not have a lot of money. She did not have a business degree and didn't really have a career path. So we struggled a lot and basically lived on the edge of poverty for most of our young life. And so as an adult, I kind of didn't realize there were other stories I could create. And I was so entrenched in this mindset of this is going to be hard. I don't like selling. I don't, this is not working, that it was just, I was basically just creating more of it. And at a certain point, I was pretty much running out of credit, pretty much running out of ideas. I was feeling really frustrated. And so I would sit at my desk, which was my kitchen table. And it was a very small kitchen table. And I was overlooking the driveway of the apartment complex I lived in. And I'm thinking, this is not what I had in mind. And I'm looking at the stack of bills and I'm basically saying, I got to figure out what to do. So I called my bank, and this is the bank called Dad. And I had called the bank called Dad quite a bit, asking to borrow money to help fund
FDIC, by the way.
Yes, exactly. And so my dad literally gave me a gift that changed everything. And he said, honey, I think you need to get a job. I don't think this is working. And he's like, I will loan you the money, but I'm really concerned that you don't have a viable way to make money in your business. And I thought to myself, if I go back and get a job, I think I might just die. Like it would be the ultimate failure, and I am not willing to do that yet. And I need to figure out how to make money. And so I became willing to do some things I hadn't been willing to do up until that point. And I started to look for help to figure out how to market my business differently and how to change what was happening to me. And literally I ran into this guy doing a training on mindset and how our mindset is dictating everything that we do. And I went through his workshop and I realized that I had a story that was so pronounced that it was dictating every thought, every belief, every decision, every opportunity that I would say yes to. And I went through a process to do what I call rewire my thinking. And that was the pivot point for me. All of a sudden, within 9 months, I was making six figures for the very first time. I continued to, double, triple my six-figure income every year after that. And I realized that the only thing had been in the way was me. What I believed, what I had made up as my story about success. And I got so, it's like things started to turn around so quickly that when I was invisible in a networking room or people were gloss over when I would explain to them what I did, all of a sudden people were waiting to talk to me at events to find out how I could mentor or coach them to do what I had done. And it was interesting how it literally changed things almost overnight for me.
So take us through that process very quickly on, you just don't magically change your story mindset. Is there one, two, or three things that you did or that you now coach your clients to do to rewire that mindset?
Well, let me try and condense about a week-long process into a 5-minute, 2-minute overview. But ultimately, what I discovered was that I had a belief that money wasn't important. And that belief was having a huge influence over a lot of other things, like what choices I would make, what decisions I would make. And so this process that I learned through this mentor is a visualization where you figure out where you formed that belief and that story that we make up about it. And then you tell your mind what better story would actually support it. And it's like you rewire the thought around it. And it's using a technique called NeuroLinguistic Programming, which is a very well-known cutting edge technology. Tony Robbins uses it. There's a lot of big name success people that use NLP. But it's basically teaching your mind a better way to think. And if you want me to get into technology, I can. Let's just say for the sake of this conversation that we have to tell our neurons form patterns. A stimulation happens, it causes a neuron to fire a very specific path based on the patterns and habits you have. And when you want to change something that's not serving you, you have to teach the neuron to fire in a new path. That's the basics of NLP. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I literally recoded the way my mind thought. So instead of running around saying, I'm hopeless at this, I'm not good at marketing, I started asking myself a question. What would I do differently today to make six figures, 3 months from now or 2 months from now or 1 month from now? And I started to realize that somebody who's really good at business, who has a successful business, is going to invest in resources. They're going to hire a virtual assistant. They're going to, have a marketing strategy that gets them in front of their clients. They're going to be comfortable, if not courageous and confident with the selling process. And so I went through everything that I hadn't been willing to do or I felt bad at. And I either got a coach or I learned how to do that, or I got someone on my team to do it for me. And I had to unravel all the things that I wasn't doing well and either get good at them or create a system to do them or hire somebody to do them. And what ultimately happened was I became willing to change how I charged for my services, package them differently, and basically change my offerings so that I could make a six-figure income. Because my business model was locked into something that I was going to be lucky to make, somewhere around $30,000 a year. So I had to be willing to change what I thought was success.
And how long did that take from the time you started going to this program to the time you started seeing it really start working for you?
9 months.
9 months.
Yeah.
Is that
I
about
actually
normal?
measured it and clocked it because I wanted to see how long it would take for me to get to that new outcome.
Mm-hmm. So it's not even so much that you had to change your story. You had to change the DNA of your story, and that how your brain was hardwired to see the story that you were living into. So you had to go in and physically, first consciously and with intent change the way you view something. And I would imagine that old story kept cropping up, that you had to push it aside and say, no, this is the new story, and do that over and over again, like building a muscle, if you will,
Yes.
so that those neurons started connecting, those new pathways started forming, and all of a sudden you would wake up in the morning, I'm assuming, and your brain just started thinking this way, and then you would take the appropriate action. Do I have that right?
Yes. And it's not to say that fears didn't still crop up, that things were never difficult. It's, our minds are really strong. They're very capable of overriding a lot of things. It's just most of us let our thoughts rule our decisions and rule our actions. And I had to train myself to do the things that needed to be done and then kind of let my mind catch up with that. And to be willing to do things that were uncomfortable so that I could achieve really what I saw as a worthy goal to break a pattern that I had been set in motion for probably lifetimes of our family.
Melanie, it's so interesting because when I was a young professional, this is back in 1985, to completely date myself, I had grew up in Seattle, graduated from Wazoo up there, came down to Phoenix because Seattle was in a recession at the time. This was before Starbucks is who they are today and before Microsoft really took off. Or actually, I was just blind to computers back then, so I didn't see Microsoft growing around me that much. But I was in Phoenix. I had all the hopes of a young graduate of getting in the advertising world, making my mark on it, doing all this fabulous creative. But again, I was in Phoenix. And I found myself somewhat depressed. I just got married. I had 2 kids that that we were taking care of, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I grow my career? How do I do this in Phoenix, Arizona, raise this family, pay for all this stuff? And I never, at that time, like you, I was like, I'm not in sales. I was so stupid. I mean, we're all in sales, especially in advertising, but I was a creative. Sales were beneath me. And I was at a loss because I had no idea how I was going to build a career and raise this family and do all this and keep my sanity. And I was thumbing through the Business Journal one day, and I came across an ad for Tony Robbins. This is when he was first started coming out. And, here is this guy, and it was cassette tapes back then, a Walkman. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to spend $39.95. That was a fortune for me, and buy his 6 cassette tape, collection. His first one out. What was the power of? I can't remember the name of it now. But something inside of me, like the universe, when it dropped that book on your toe, said, "No, you are going to do this." And I bought it. Went against everything I thought as a young man, a naive young man at that point. And I put that on, and I bet you I listened to those tapes 20 or 30 times. I would climb this mountain after work to get exercise, and I would put Tony in, and I would listen to him up and back for probably 9 months. And I didn't really know what NeuroLinguistic Programming was at the time, but I can tell you it had a profound impact on me through those tapes. And all of a sudden I started seeing my life change. And it was just one of those kinds of things that I didn't even recognize what was happening at the time, but I saw that I had to absolutely change the story I was living in at that point, because mine was definitely about there's not enough money, there's never going to be enough money, I just got to stay focused and do what I can do, versus looking at that story of potential abundance that's in your life if you're willing to change the way you view it, the way you think about it.
Yeah. And I love that you shared that, Park, because I think many of us can have that moment when we realize we've created this story of our life, but it doesn't necessarily match the goal or the vision of what we really wanted for ourselves. And somewhere during that time, in the very early days of my career, I was at a meeting for coaches in the Los Angeles area, and this man gave a presentation called "It's All Made Up." And I didn't really get the power of it right away. But what I realize now is that what he was saying is that every single thought is made up. Everything we have right now, every result, it's made up. It's what we chose to make of ourselves. And so if we want a better life, we want better results, we want better relationships, we want more prosperity, we want more health, then we have to be willing to make up the story of how that's real and then live into it. Take the steps that make that real, change the thinking that that's real. And that was such a powerful wake up for me when I realized it is all made up. Every thought I'm thinking is a thought I make up about it. It's just because it's my thought doesn't mean it's real. It's my reality of that situation based on my beliefs and my filters of what's right and wrong.
Yeah, so we have to be science fiction writers for our own lives. We have to create a fiction that we can live into and create to make it fact, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Melanie, let me take a break for our sponsors right now so that they can tell their stories. And when we come back, could you take us through a little bit about your process, the kinds of companies and people that you are helping, and how everything you have learned to get you to where you are today, how are you then sharing that story with your friends, families, and customers to help them optimize what they're doing for, what did you say earlier, back to my notes, addicted to high-performance strategies. I'd love to cover that when we come back. And then I want to put you to the test if we can do our lightning round, my 10 story cycle questions that I have you answer that helps us best understand your story. You up for that?
Absolutely. I'm game.
Let's do that right after these messages. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Business A Story, then you are going to love Definitive, the email from Convince and Convert that many marketers say is the most useful resource around. Each day, the team at Convince and Convert picks a topic and sends you the 3 best resources ever created about that topic. It's topical, it's timely, it's useful, so go to definitivedigest.com and subscribe for free right now. Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the best call to action button color on your website? Yeah, you probably didn't see that one coming, did you? Well, what's the best shape and sizes of your CTA buttons? And what copy gets more clicks? You know, these questions have interrupted my sleep patterns for weeks now, until I downloaded a helpful new email marketing guide from Emma called Why We Click, the Psychology Behind a Great Call to Action. You'll learn how applying just a little bit of brain science can transform your CTA buttons into small but mighty conversion powerhouses. It covers the button color, copy, and placement that helps skyrocket click rates. Check it out at myemma.com/click. You know, Emma helps marketers everywhere send smart, stylish email newsletters, promotions, and automated campaigns, and to help us all rest a little easier knowing our email marketing is doing its job. So check out their new publication at myemma.com/click. You, like all business leaders and communicators, have an important brand story to tell, but it's probably not being heard. There's just too much competition for our attention. Unless, of course, you tell a better story.
For over a year now, I have connected you with more than 50 international story artists through this podcast to help you craft your ideal brand story for the growth of your enterprise and your people. Did you know I'm also available to you for speaking engagements, brand and leadership story workshops, even for one-on-one Skype or telephone brand story strategy consults? Plus, you can begin clarifying your brand story right now by downloading the interactive DIY workbook at businessofstory.com. You see, your sales don't have to be comedies or tragedies. You can make them epic by clarifying your brand story and connecting with audiences and customers like never before. So download your workbook today at businessofstory.com. And if you're not 100% satisfied, I'll happily refund your money. And one last thought. Just remember, the most potent story you ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a good one, my friends. Story on.
Hey, welcome back to Business of Story, and our guest today, Melanie Benson, a lifestyle business expert. And I've just been enjoying this conversation so much, Melanie, because of all that you've been through and how that has informed your story and how you are now helping your friends, family, customers, clients optimize with just the right strategies their businesses, I guess, all across industries. Can you take us a little bit more into now, what is it you do exactly for people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, kind of taking this idea of optimizing into the entrepreneurial world, many entrepreneurs, they get started because they have this vision or they have a passion for a particular body of work or something they know that's going to help their ideal clients. But they don't always know how to structure their business. They don't know how to change their mindset, as we've been talking about. They don't know how to get the operations of their business handled because they just want to do the thing that they love. So a big part of what I'm working with my clients around, and most of my clients are thought leaders, change makers, some type of an expert who's building a business around that expertise. I teach them how to create the mindset, the habits, and the strategies that will allow them to have the greatest impact and exponentially grow their income. And then for some people, that's just teaching them some real basics about leverage and how they might repackage some of their services so that they're not having to work so much in the business to make money and they can actually have more of a life, which is something that a lot of entrepreneurs are missing, right? Mm-hmm. And others, they've already figured out how to make money and they've really got that part down. But Park, so many business owners, they kind of hit the wall and they can't grow anymore because they've become a bottleneck to higher levels of growth. So they're doing too many things alone in their business. So I might be teaching them how to transform how they use their time so that they can scale their business and be able to grow their income in a bigger way without them having to do it all. So it's a little bit custom depending on where somebody's at in their business trajectory. But a lot of it's mindset work. Oh my gosh, it's amazing how many people get in their own way just simply because their mind is programmed for something that they're struggling with. And, I always say that if you want to take your business to the next level, you usually can't do it at the same way that got you where you are right now. So what you did really well to start making money you don't just do more of that. You have to change it up so that you can evolve your business and make a greater impact, but do it without you having to push that ball up the hill all by yourself.
Are there a couple, 2-3 things that we could do right now to start helping change that mindset?
Well, Park, one of my all-time favorite go-to strategies is delegation. And I know if you're in this all by yourself, or maybe you're a service-based business owner, or you consider yourself a freelancer, that might seem like the craziest thing on earth to do. But think of it like, what if you started to delegate more of your home tasks to your children, right? Like we can empower our young people to be better helpers at home. Now, if that's already being done or that isn't necessarily an option for you because you don't have any children, you might look at, is it time to get a bookkeeper or a personal assistant who can literally just free you up from the minutia of day-to-day operations? So I'm always a fan of starting with, how can I free up my time to do what no one else can do to grow the business? By simply hiring people or aligning with people who do what I hate with passion, right? Like there's always tasks and activities that burn us out. There are people who absolutely love to do that, and they would love to do more of it.
Well, I got to tell you, I've got Jess Ostroff, who is producing this show right now that nobody hears, and she has Don't Panic Management. And I can tell you one of the best things I ever did was work with her and her team because they take so much off of my plate. I don't have to worry about it. Tremendous value in the process. So I hear you. I learned that lesson early on when I first started my ad agency way back in the day as a one-man band. And it was really hard to switch that mindset out of, no, I got to do it all. I got to keep as much money in my pocket as possible. But what you've got to really consider is with that sort of mindset, what is it actually costing you? You might save an extra $100 and have it in your pocket at the end of the month, but you could maybe make $5,000 if you let that go and let somebody else run with it. And that's a real hard mindset to overcome, especially if you're a solopreneur or just starting out on your own.
I love that you said that. I think the saying goes, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Absolutely. So that's a mindset, right?
It's a complete mindset, but it's also maybe a practical how. One of the things I teach my clients when I'm helping them build their teams is to ask yourself better questions. Like we get trapped in a limitation by saying something like, well, I can't afford it. Well, yeah, you might not be able to afford it, but that's not going to get you into growth. That's just going to keep you where you are. So what if you changed the way you process the challenge and you said, what would I have to be willing to do differently so I could make this investment in a personal assistant or in a podcast producer or a whatever that you need to grow? And then your mind becomes very resourceful. And it's like, well, what if we sold 2 more clients every month because I had more time? Or I could actually finally launch that online product that I've been talking about forever, or I could speak 3 more times a month, right? Mm-hmm. We come up with solutions when we're more resourceful with our problem-solving approach.
It's interesting. It's competing stories. It's the stories that we currently own, and it's versus a new story that we have to write, a new fiction that we have to write and live into and make it fact.
Yes, I'm a big fan of creating this story called I Am Resourceful. I may not know how to do this right now, but because I'm resourceful, I can access a new possibility at any moment.
What's another story that we tell ourselves that you come across, that you see, hear consistently with your customers that probably we all struggle with?
It's a variation of I can't do that. And so some of my clients, the way they've been growing their business, they're so overwhelmed. They're so burned out because it's only been them, or the way they built their business wasn't using their passions and what we like to call your superpowers. So your business became toxic for you. It became a prison. And so a lot of my clients are looking for a better way to get that thing they're passionate about out, but they're in this story that has completely limited them. I can't grow my business. It won't work for me. And it's crushing because it's like, if you had just come to me earlier, I could have helped you design a lifestyle business. I could have helped design a way for you to get this out in a more sustainable fashion. So there's a lot of versions of that. There's also, I'll bring a really great business idea to someone, but if their paradigm or their story is too small, they'll say, that will never work for me. Or I'm not the kind of person who can do that. And it may just simply be, maybe let's introduce a licensing model or a certification program, or maybe you should start speaking to spread your message. So I'm really big on creating credibility platforms for my clients. And it's amazing how people will just shoot an idea down because it doesn't match the story they're telling themselves about who they are in their business. And it's a simple shift. Be willing to get out of your comfort zone, to do what must be done to get your work out there in a greater way, to shift the income strategy so it's not tied to you having to spend an hour in your business to make money. Just because you haven't seen it or you aren't comfortable with it doesn't mean it's not the best path for you. Now, of course, Park, this does bring up a really good point, and I don't want to dismiss this, is that, you're not supposed to follow a cookie cutter, right? Like, you are a unique human being, And you have to find the right model for you. I'm just saying, don't be limited and dismiss something because it's new or you don't personally see how it works yet.
How many people do you come across that are living into the wrong story in the business they're trying to create? And maybe it only takes a little bit of a pivot for it to really open up. And again, it's going back because they're living mom or dad's story.
Ooh, this is a great question. I'm so glad you asked this because it might be mom's story, it might be dad's story, but sometimes it's actually the wrong mentor's story.
Okay.
I've been in situations where all of those have occurred. It might be my husband or my wife's story. I had a client a couple years ago who was really kind of feeling trapped by what his wife felt comfortable with him doing. And his wife was really uncomfortable with some of the risks he wanted to take to grow his business, which would ultimately create more revenue. He was trying to change his business model over in Europe. But his wife was so terrified by the decisions he was making. He didn't want to, get divorced or, put undue stress on the marriage. And so he was holding himself back. But I've also seen, and that question reminded me, many years ago, I was speaking for, I won't say who it is, but a big mentor in the speaking world. And I would come in and do my get out of overwhelm strategies. And several people ended up working with me from that particular mentor because they were trying to build his model, speak on the road, basically keynote and get paid, which is a great model, but it wasn't necessarily right for everyone. And so I always used to say, be careful what ladder you're putting or what wall you're putting your ladder against. And if it's not the top of the building that you want to be the top of, you've got to know that before you build the building, right? Like many of us are just leaning up against someone else's success going, just make me like that. Mm-hmm. But it's not really fulfilling for us. And so we burn out and we lose the inspiration and the motivation. And that's one of the true signs that you're in the wrong place is you're procrastinating or you feel conflicted about what you're trying to create.
That is so true. I'm just actually writing that down if you heard that long pause there. You know that there's a challenge when you're procrastinating, that you've got a conflict going because I suppose you're at a bit of an intersection and you're not really sure which way to go.
Right. It's one of the 3 success barriers, again, going back to stories and our mindset. I wrote a book called Rewired for Wealth. It's actually a downloadable digital book where I talk about this because most of my clients, if they're stuck, they're procrastinating, they're kind of trapped in their safety zone and they're not really going after their dream or their goal, one of 3 things is up for them. And conflict, I call it hidden conflict, I call it internal conflict because internally pursuing one thing feels at war with pursuing something else and you get stuck and you're paralyzed. It's like, well, I don't want to lose this, but I don't know how else to get there. And so you just don't do anything.
Mm-hmm. What are the other 2?
The other 2 is what I call fear disguised as logic. Fear disguised as logic, basically, because fears are valuable. They tell us something about that something about this thing in front of us is not right for us, or there's something we don't understand or we don't know. So fear can be information. But what happens for a lot of people is fear is disguised as logic. And so you have this goal or this dream or something you want to do. And then these fears come up disguised as logical reasons why you shouldn't pursue it. Oh, well, that's going to cost too much money. That, mom or dad or whoever might not appreciate that. I don't know how to do it. I don't have time. These are all logical reasons, right? Mm-hmm. But they're not valid if that goal or dream is something that is inside of you and you really want it. And so a lot of people never achieve the dream. They never get to their goals because they let the logic of how or when or time take over. So that's another one. And then I call the other one limitation stories, which is what we've talked about today, is they've got a limitation story that causes them to be trapped and they can't see a possibility, a path or a way that matches who they believe they are. So they live inside this limitation their entire life.
Are these the 3 fundamentals to your book, Rewired for Wealth?
Rewired for Wealth basically is how to rewire the mental patterns that are driving every thought, every decision, and every action you take. And I literally talk about exactly what I did to rewire my own thinking, my own story that caused me to create something that nobody in my family had ever created anything like that. Nobody had ever made that kind of money. And I don't define myself by money per se, but there was something about breaking through those poverty patterns that I really wanted to be able to do. Because I'm very, very close to my niece, who's now 18, but she was like 13, or she was 3, I think, when I started this journey. And I wanted to show her what was possible when you overcome the stories that maybe take on lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes in a family. Well, so that was a big part of my motivation.
I mean, that's awesome. So that helps kind of rewire that. I go back to this concept that you were talking about NeuroLinguistic Programming. Is this like a little short guide on how to do that? Because it just seems like such a big deal, but you say it can actually be simply done.
Well, so there's a range of how NLP works, and there's, I mean, you're using language to change people's beliefs and their patterns. And so, if you look at what Tony Robbins is doing out there in the world, and I know on one of your episodes you were talking about that recently, Tony Robbins can actually use language in a nanosecond to create a snap in how somebody's neural pathways run. And I can do that too. The way I choose to use it is I wanted to teach people how to take responsibility of their own thought patterns, how to literally take command of the stories they're making up about their life, their money, their relationships, and to create new stories about them. Because we all tell stories all day long, right? We are masterful storytellers, especially here in this podcast. It's all about crafting stories. And these stories are impacting our clients. They're impacting our financial lives. They may be impacting our team members if we're leaders. So what if we could right now in this moment create a better story of why Susie Q isn't doing her job properly? Is it because she's not motivated and maybe I need to let her go? Is it because she's not good at organizing her time? Maybe the story we need to make up is Susie doesn't know how valuable she is. And as her leader, what if I actually figure out how to inspire her differently so she gets back into peak performance mode? Now, as a leader, I'm making up a new story that changes the stress level, causes me to feel more peaceful about Susie, and actually gives me better strategies of how to manage her. See, in every single moment of every day, we're making up a story about something that causes us stress. I'm a big fan of making up a story that's more empowering and more accessible to do something constructive with it.
So I can get all of this out of this ebook?
Okay, well, maybe not the team building part. I went on a little bit of a tangent there. But in the ebook, and it's a very short book, it's not super long, it's absolutely free. I would love for it to be your gift, that I'm going to show you what those 3 limitations are, the barriers, and how to start teaching our mind to create better stories and to change our reactions and our messaging about things that we're struggling with in our life, whether it's money or whatever. And then I also go into something we didn't talk about at all today, but I believe that you said DNA earlier. I believe that in our DNA, we have patterns. And those patterns are either getting us results we want or don't. And so I talk about the 7 most common ones that I run into it with my clients. And, that'll be a little bit of think of it like a little mini assessment to kind of help you figure out, are the patterns you're working with getting you results or not? And then you can kind of see which ones you are most familiar with in your life and some strategies to create more constructive patterns.
All right. Where can we find your book?
Rewiredforwealth.com.
Rewired, F-O-R?
Mm-hmm.
forwealth.com.
Yes.
That is awesome. Now, as I promised, I want to put you through the 10-question lightning round.
All right, let's make it happen.
Here's what we do. So this is the story cycle process. I want to, and there's, by the way, no right or wrong to this, but it's just kind of fun. So I want you to, when I give you the question, to answer it as quickly and succinctly as possible. And this is your story, the Melanie Benson story about what you offer to your customers. So your personal brand of what you offer your customers. Are you ready? And
are we looking for one-word answers or like a succinct sentence, or does it matter?
A succinct sentence is usually, if it comes down to one word, that's fine too.
Okay.
Again, no right or wrong, but our listeners seem to like this because it's a way that they can use these same 10 questions to really understand their brand story better. Because as you know, everyone, I'm a big believer that nobody's going to buy your story until you own it first. And it sounds like, Melanie, you've got yours dialed in. So let's go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Set the clock. Here we go. Number 1, what do you do better than anyone else?
Find stuck spots and get people unstuck.
Number 2, who cares?
The creatives and thought leaders who want to make a bigger difference with their work.
You beat me to number 3. What is it that they want?
They want to make a greater impact with their gift.
Why do they want it?
There's something deep inside of them that is craving getting it out in the world.
What's keeping them from having it?
Either it's usually knowing how or organizing themselves in a new, more effective way.
Or a third thing, maybe they are just simply telling themselves the wrong story.
I almost said that. I thought that would be cliche, but yes, you are right.
I do not fear cliches. Number 5, I asked you that. What's keeping them from having it? Number 6, how are you uniquely equipped to help them get it?
I've personally moved out of my own blocks and achieved significant high 6 and 7 figure success doing what I love. So I know what works and I know what doesn't.
And it took you.
And I'm a trained coach that can elicit their greatness and then use proven strategies and integrate them.
Beautiful. That's number 7. What are you going to do? What physically are your features and benefits that you do to help them get there?
I will work with them one-on-one, depending on the level, private coaching time, where I elicit their vision, their challenge, and help them create a new set of strategies and habits and mindsets to get there.
Awesome. Number 8, what does success look like to them?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask what it looked like to me.
That's what everybody thinks. No, to them, your audience, what does success look like?
Success to them typically means they are a recognized authority and influencer in the industry they serve and are paid well to share their expertise.
Awesome. Number 9, what does success feel like to them?
Oh, this is a good one. It feels aligned and powerful and inspiring all in one wrapped up ball.
Aligned, powerful.
Aligned, powerful, and inspiring.
Awesome. Finally, number 10, how do you get them to come back for more? How do they build a ritual around your services?
I want to say 7 things.
The top 3 then.
Yes. Well, over-delivering, extraordinary awareness and insights. This isn't going to be succinct, but part of it is creating a mechanism through what I call they pay monthly to do the work. And so there's a model of we do this work every month. And part of it is, the third part of it is I give them a roadmap of what's possible when their business is fully functioning and optimized. And so knowing that we're going through this process, they want to keep coming back to finish the process because they want to really be at that highest level possible.
Perfect. Well, do you see how those 10 steps, those 10 basic questions right there help you own your brand story? Some cases you had to think a little bit, which is great. A lot of people stumble with 5 out of the 10 of them, but we use this just to help people truly understand and see if they've got their brand story straight, and then are they living into that story? So thank you for playing along on this edition of the Story Cycle Rapid Fire 10-question quiz thing.
That was fun. I'm glad I've done my homework and got my brand story pretty clear.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for being here today. And you told us where you can find the book at rewiredforwealth.com. Where can they find out more about you?
MelanieBenson.com is my main space on the internet. And there's an extraordinary community that we're building there of people who really are hungry to amplify their impact and their income in the world. So there's some tools that will help you, and you can join the community, and we'll learn and grow together. So you can find me at MelanieBenson.com.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being on the show today. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this edition of Business of Story. Again, you know where to go if you've got questions about your own story or tools, or to take the 10-question quiz Melanie just so bravely endured. Visit us at businessofstory.com. Certainly join us over at iTunes and share your hopefully, of the show. Give us a rating there so that the rest of your world can learn about what we're doing here and bringing amazing story artists like Melanie to your world. So thank you again for listening. Join us next Monday when we will have another phenomenal guest for you to help you craft and tell compelling brand stories that sell. And until then, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Emma and by Convince and Convert, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by